I will take this opportunity to now introduce our next moderator, who is Chamber Councillor Tammy Suleiman, and she's also the founder of TS Consulting, which is a PR and communication strategy consulting firm. Tammy will moderate the panel discussing the shaping the future of tourism in the Cayman Islands. With over 2 decades of experience in media, Tammy began her career in print journalism before transitioning to television in 2007. In 2015, Tammy became the news director at the Cayman Islands' only independent TV station. In 2019, she was promoted to station manager at Hurley's Media Limited, now Compass Media Limited, overseeing television news, talk shows, and radio content. Tammy's career also includes managing communications for DART, the largest developer and private sector employer in the Cayman Islands, and directing communications at the tech-focused investment firm B1 and its subsidiary Bullish. She now runs her consultancy firm, as I mentioned, providing PR, content creation, media strategy, and more throughout the Cayman Islands. So without further ado, I introduce Tammy Suleiman.
Thank you for that introduction, Omari, and good morning to everyone. It's really a privilege to be here before all of you today, and we're going to be discussing an extremely important topic, and arguably they're all very important topics, but I suspect this one is going to be looming quite large as we get on to the campaign trail that's before us in the lead up to our general elections. So again, a hearty welcome to today's panel discussion titled Sustaining Economic Success, Focusing on Tourism. It goes without saying that tourism has long been one of the cornerstones of the Cayman Islands economy. It has helped shape our identity, supported countless livelihoods, and is driving our country's global reputation as a premier destination. However, as we stand at the crossroads of recovery and innovation, recovery, of course, from the pandemic that wreaked havoc in 2020, the tourism sector faces both significant challenges and remarkable opportunities. And over the next hour, we are going to do quite a bit of discussion and delving into the subtopics under this overarching tourism umbrella. And as you can tell from the people that I have on the panel with me, as well as our Deputy Premier who will be joining us shortly, you are in for quite the discussion this morning. And we are going to delve, as I said, into the current state of the industry. We're going to be looking at recovery trends and shifts in visitor preferences post-pandemic. We're also going to address critical topics like the preservation of our iconic 7 Mile beach. We're going to also focus on the ongoing cruise berth facility debate, the development of a comprehensive tourism strategy. As you know, we need a plan if we're going somewhere. We need that roadmap. And the role of economic policies like minimum wage in fostering sustainable growth. So, to my left, we have 2 esteemed panelists who bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to the discussion. Please welcome Ellio Solomon to the extreme left, the chair of the Cayman Turtle Center, which of course is an institution at the heart of our ecotourism efforts. He's also the executive program manager of the Association for Cruise Tourism, known as ACT. And of course, you will remember him as a former MLA who brought quite a few pieces of legislation when you were part of that government, as well as a former talk show host of Crosstalk. Please welcome Mr. Ellio Solomon. We also have Troy Leacock, who most of you will know as the immediate past president of the Cayman Islands Tourism Association, and he has long been an advocate for the industry's sustainable growth. He is a water sports director and continues to play an incredible and remarkable role in our industry. Troy, thank you so much for being here with us. And I'd like to welcome to the stage, we are so privileged to have with us the Deputy Premier, the Honourable Kenneth Bryan. He's going to share insights from his ministry, that's the Ministry of Tourism, providing the government's perspective on sustaining economic success through tourism. And as he makes his way to the stage, We're going to be looking at how we should navigate these evolving demands of the global tourism market while preserving our natural environment, fostering community engagement, and ensuring the economic benefits are felt across all sectors of our society. So without further ado, I want to allow our Deputy Premier a few minutes to talk to you before we get into our panel discussion. Deputy Premier, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Tammy. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Distinguished guests, speakers, fellow panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, special good morning to you. I'm just going to say a few words before I get on to the panel itself, and that's one of the perks of being a sponsor today. The Chamber of Commerce has a long-standing reputation for stimulating dialogue on issues that impact the growth and the development of our island. And today's event is in keeping with that philosophy. When the Ministry of Tourism was approached to be a sponsor for this forum, we embraced the opportunity to be one of the title sponsors because we also recognize the value of engaging in dialogue and sharing perspectives through platforms such as this. These discussions are taking place here today, not just about exchanging ideas, they're about addressing the challenges and driving actionable solutions that align with the realities and the aspirations of our people. I am particularly pleased that today's panel places a tourism focus and the center of our conversation, and I'm happy to be a part of the panel today. Tourism is not just merely a contributor to our GDP, and as well as the second pillar of our economy, it is the heartbeat of our island, the engine for employment and a driver for investment, and a showcase for promoting our natural beauty and our cultural heritage to the rest of the world. This is a valuable opportunity to shine the spotlight on some of the most topical issues in tourism, and I'm looking forward to it, which I'm sure most of us here are, to a productive and enlightening conversation. And if Mr. Solomon is involved, I'm certain that it will be. I'm here not only to share the government's perspective on this topic, but also to listen to the views of you, the people, and the other panelists and the audience members alike to engage in meaningful exchange of ideas. I extend my heartfelt thanks to the President, Joanne Lawson, and the Executive Committee members, and of course, our best friend, Mr. Will Panu, the Executive Director of the Chamber, who always does a great job, for hosting this forum this morning. It's not easy to get the various stakeholders and partners from private sector and public sector, as well as government representatives all in the same room at the same time. But every year, the Chamber of Commerce seems to get it done, but nobody else can get that done. I also extend my thanks to my fellow panelists, who I know is going to give some interesting points, for being here so we can inform the people of the various viewpoints. With that being said, I thank you so much. God bless you all, and I look forward to a positive conversation.
Thank you so much, Deputy Premier, and I also want to extend our gratitude to your ministry for sponsoring this session as we get into this discussion right now. So, when we take a look at the state of Grand Cayman's tourism sector, we need to look at the numbers, right? The numbers do paint a picture for us. And we can see that our air arrivals continue to do strong in 2023. And if you'd permit me to just share some of the latest numbers that we have. We tapped out with air arrivals at 429,000, and it seems like we're on track for the same for 2024, because at the end of November, we're waiting on December's numbers. But at the end of 2024, of November last year, we were at 385,000, right? So it gives good reason that we will achieve maybe even more than we did in 2023. However,
we did.
Oh, so you know already? Are you going to break news now?
Let's break that. Let's break it. So I'll tell you all about them.
What's 2024 overall numbers?
All right. So we're up by 2% for 2024. The overall arrivals was 437,842 persons, which is 2% higher. Now, recognizing that we did have some pretty interesting weather over 2024, which caused us a little bit of cancellations. So we would have done a lot better. Our projections were going to be around 9 to 10% over than 23, but we'll take the 2% increase. At least we know we're going upwards.
What about cruise? I think we're seeing a...
The totally opposite direction.
Yeah.
We're actually down 15%. We were expecting to make 1.1 million, and actually we didn't even make that mark. We got 1,074,000 passengers, which is really, really terrible. I think you all know the perspective of the government in respect to cruise and what we need to do, but going from almost 2 million in 2019 to now almost 50% and projected to continue to decline. But I don't want to eat up the conversation.
No, but that's important to know because I had gone on to the ESO, so you're going to put those latest numbers into the website,
Yes,
right, for the rest
will.
of us,
Yes.
and do a little release and whatnot. But that's important because you're absolutely right. So in 2006, so if we look at the last 25 years, in 2006 we hit our maximum cruise tourism numbers over that 25-year span where we hit 1.3 million. And then in 2018, we had the 1.92, so we were almost at that 1.93. However, in 2023, we were at 1.2, and now you're saying that last year for 2024, it was just
Less
a million?
than 1.1.
Less than 1.1.
1,074,000.
Okay, right? So we hear those numbers. If you had to give a very 2-3 sentence picture, what are we dealing with right now? And knowing those numbers, what would you say about our state of tourism today?
Well, we got to be specific. So it's about the state of cruise tourism. Stayover is doing very, very well, projected to continue to increase as long as there's no abnormal weather patterns, which causes a lot of cancellations for stayover passengers. And we're doing better at trying to minimize that by having cancellation insurance and so forth for passengers who are coming in, and working with the CETA organization. And I want to give this opportunity to welcome the new president. Stand up, let everybody see you. This lovely lady will be the person who will be working with
Troy.
With government.
With government, yeah.
With government in respect to the future. And I thank Troy so much for all of his hard work in the last year from CETA. But we project that the future will be good for stayover. In respect to cruise, pretty straightforward. If we don't have a pier, it will continue to get worse.
So we have some critical questions to answer.
Yeah.
Troy, let's go to you. You hear those numbers. You've been in the game a long time. Your livelihood is wrapped up in this, yours and your employees.
Well,
what are your thoughts?
As you already articulated, the state of Cayman's tourism is really a tale of two sectors. The air arrivals, stayover, and cruise. I'm going to push back a little bit on the minister because even though we did have an adverse hurricane season, which definitely impacted, I believe, reasonably our numbers, I still feel that our air arrivals, our target, it was 500,000 in 2019, and we have got to set our goals and getting back to that sooner rather than later. For last year, we were up 2%, but when you really think about it, some of our competitors like Turks and Caicos, BVI, USVI, they're up double digits. In the context of looking back to 2019, in 2019, Turks and Caicos had fewer air arrivals than we did. Turks and Caicos is now 73% above us. We had 437, as the minister just said. Turks and Caicos are up 600,000 plus. So they're up they're up more than 200,000 more than us. So in terms of relative performance, it would be remiss of us not to say, hey, what is happening and what do we need to do? Quite frankly, I believe that the amount of time that we closed and stayed closed and stayed closed and stayed closed, we didn't just pay that price in 2021, 2022. We are actually paying that price now. And it is probably going to take us another couple of years at our growth rate. Even if we have a 10% growth rate in this coming year, which we're optimistically hoping for, we're still a couple of years away to getting back to where we were in 2019. An important metric to look at is we now have 1,000 bedrooms more than we did in 2019, but we had 67,000 fewer air arrivals. Anytime you get that kind of vacancy or a disparity between supply and demand, it's going to start dislocation in the industry. And then cruise, I'm just going to say Cayman's cruise tourism is in crisis. We'll talk about that more, but it's as simple as that. You just cannot get away from that.
All right.
Well,
And
If I
Deputy
may,
Premier.
I think it's important to put things in context because the increase amounts you're speaking about is in different years. So we may compare ourselves to other Caribbean islands, but we also have to think about the rest of the economy, and too much growth too fast may not be great for the islands. I do agree that we could be doing better. We've added an extra $2 million to our tourism budget in a very expensive 2004 advertising year. And we recognize that the numbers are going to increase, but our air arrivals have been increasing. What you may compare is that Cayman has been doing so well for so many years. The opportunity for growth is within margin as opposed to other islands who've never been doing very well. But I have to agree with you. We are suffering from the lockdown period and the negative effects that has caused us, where other people got their attention in islands that were open before us. We were staying safe. So we can't have our cake and eat it too. We were keeping ourselves safe, but it did have some damaging effects on the people.
But I think, too, the point is, and at least this is my perspective, we also can't rest on our laurels, right? And
Correct.
just rely on what has taken place up to today. We have to continue to innovate. We have to understand what that roadmap is to move forward, and we have to plan, right? Mr. Solomon, and sorry, I was on a first-name basis. Gentlemen, do you mind if I use first names? All right, Ellio, let's go.
Yes.
Your thoughts. You've heard the numbers. You're the chair of the Turtle Farm. You're very involved in ACT. You've always had an ear to the ground. You've done what I've done for many years.
Yeah.
So your thoughts, and a former MLA, your thoughts.
Well, I think that, first of all, I don't think I have to repeat some of the numbers that these gentlemen have given. I think that in terms of stayover, I think Cayman is doing really well. I think we're talking about additional rooms. I understand even the Hyatt's now going to bring another 300 plus. So I don't think there's much issue there. If I do state something, I believe that on terms of stayover visitors, particularly as we see even the damage that's happened to some of our beaches, I think that in itself should cause us to start to rethink whether we want to be as beach-centric as we are, and maybe start to really look at other ways to diversify our stayover visitor product. You know, I remember, for example, they had that program, I think it was GCCP, which was Global Citizen something that took place during COVID.
Program, yeah.
That was during
That
COVID.
expired, for example, I think in November 2024. So again, just on that sort of basis, you need to ask yourself, are we putting all of our eggs in one basket? That would be my concern. And I think not only beach-centric, but also that we're just strictly trying to get the high net worth persons as well. And I think we need to understand there's a complement. There's a reason why the world needs that diversity. In terms of cruise tourism, I think persons have expressed it. It is a very unfortunate situation, and I think it's something that people are not really paying attention to. If you look at still visitors, they get our culture through immersion. They get to stay here for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, assimilate themselves in that culture. The cruise tourist doesn't do that. They come and they want to grab as much of your culture as they can within that 4 or 5 hour period that they're here. But why that's good is because both result in an expansion of the economy, but cruise tourism forces you to diversify. It allows you to fund artisans that are going to shape the turtle that the cruise tourists didn't get to enjoy. And the list goes on. And if we lose cruise tourism, we're going to lose that diversification. And that is going to impact stayover visitors because a lot of those things that stayover visitors are enjoying are in large part only surviving because of that need through curation process to grab our culture in 4 or 5 hours. And I don't think people are considering that. Many years ago, I used to say it all the time. If you plant a tree next to your house and you've allowed it to grow for X amount of years, you have to be careful when you're pulling the roots up. You might just damage the foundation in the process. Cruise tourism has been with us since the 40s. And you're not going to just get rid of cruise tourism and not have really serious impacts on this economy. And I think people are just being too dismissive. Yeah. And the reality of it is that it doesn't take much to solve this problem. Change has been knocking at our door for decades now, and it's simply saying to you that for economic reasons and other reasons, the cruise industry is developing bigger ships. And just as technology evolves, I'm sure there's somebody that is using a rotary phone, but not very much. And the same way that technology is evolving, it's saying, I need peers. There's also the stress for peers, and this has been around for a long time because even from disembarking and embarking, you need the pairs. And I see a,
Yeah,
I see the
you
cue.
see my face, you know, so we're
As
going
a
into
talk show host, I see the cue.
Yeah.
I'll just end by saying that, you know, again, we really need it, and the solution is simple. But I want to say to people, if you think that you're going to get rid of cruise tourism and not impact stayovers, you're making a big mistake.
Well, this is where the need for the plan comes into play. And there is a desire to have a referendum question, one of three, to be on the ballots in the upcoming general election. Whether that will come to pass, we have to wait to see what happens in Parliament. But fundamentally, people may say, well, it should be those in government who should make that decision as to whether or not we move forward with the change. And there are those who are saying we can't because of the environmental perspective. There are those who are saying we absolutely need to because we have too many lives that are still wrapped up in cruise. Ultimately, Deputy Premier, you want to put it to the people. You're saying government's taking a neutral stance in this. But I'm suspecting that you feel like this is something that we do need to do.
Well, just to make clarity, I'm fully in support of building a pier. So if there's any misconception of that, hopefully that
That's a
clears
position
that.
that's changed over the years, though, because were you always of that opinion that we needed to have that?
I was always supportive of cruise. What I was having difficulty with was the proposed plan that was there before was extending a cargo facility downtown, which is our main city capital.
Okay.
And I think the cargo facility needs to move out of town. I still hold that position today, but obviously I'm one of members of the government, so you have to do collective responsibility. If this was a dictatorship, I would have moved it out of town already. But, you know, this is democracy.
That's a strong word right before general election.
I know, but we still live in a democracy.
He's just stressing
and I
it's not.
respect that democracy so much that I believe that we should have a referendum, because there are people who genuinely say, you know, I don't like the cruise model. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people who are in the hotel industry go, the cruise model affects my business and I don't like it. But who decides that? Is it the elected arm? Particularly as sensitive as this is, I think the people should have their say in that. And the fact that people don't want that to be allowed is quite disturbing, because what you're saying is, let me control it, you shouldn't have a say. Nobody should be saying, let's not allow the people to have their say on it. Now, if you want to put thresholds on it to say, okay, then you need to make a certain mark in order for you to take it into consideration. That's why the government decided to leave it to non-binding, because we recognize the results will be for the next administration to make a decision. But particularly, we saw how negatively it impacted the last administration. I think the progressives would have won if that cruise situation wasn't in the way. So I think that the right thing to do is allow the people to have their say, and the next administration can take that directive based on the people's input. I can't see no other way around it. And I tell you what, if we don't have a referendum, here's what's going to happen. You're going to have a group of people who are elected, some who are against it, some who are for it, and nobody's going to want to make a move because they don't know where the population is. And then we're going to get stuck doing nothing for 4 years.
Arguably, that's where we've been for the last.
Agreed, and that's why we should have had a referendum before.
Years.
Interestingly enough, the cruise pair referendum individuals are now saying we shouldn't have a referendum, when the whole organization was created saying cruise pair referendum.
Well, I don't think it's as cut and dry as they did want it and they didn't want it. There's other mitigating factors, but this discussion isn't necessarily about the actual referendum itself, but it's about having a plan and taking action. And we heard from Mr. Woody Foster in the earlier panel, it's not about looking back, we need to look forward.
Agreed.
And about having that plan and making a decision and moving forward with it, regardless of who's in power, regardless of the flip-flopping that we've been having every 4 years, right? So I think that's
what is the
something
plan? The plan to stay in cruise? Because if you don't have a pair, you're not in cruise anymore. I can promise you. And we are about to release in my ministry a series of videos where I've sat down with all the key executives, asking them directly these questions about what will happen if we don't have a pair. And the answers are really, really dark for this country. And anybody who lives in the cruise space, if we don't build a pair, you might as well start thinking about a different industry, because you're not going to have enough business to sustain an income or to keep your business running. And that's a simple fact. And I don't want to sugarcoat it. I know I'm being a bit straightforward, but if I don't be raw with this, and I'm going to set people up for failure, people are going to keep on putting cash in their business thinking it's going to come better. And it's not. It's continuing to decline. In 5 years, there's probably going to be at least 60% of those persons in cruise, the businesses shut down, not being able to provide for their families. And that's a fact. If the people still don't want to go forward with it, that's okay. Let the next government plan for where we're going to help those Caymanians, those Caymanian business owners in respect to the other parts of our economy, whether it be a new industry or what have you. But my job is to be honest and be straightforward about the realities and what we see coming.
So we're going to hear a bit more about those questions that you had asked, but I do want to ask, Troy, what are your thoughts on the, because we've gotten into this topic
Yeah,
already,
I'd like
so
to
let's
step
go.
back
Cruise.
from up here, right, and go back to cruise tourism. Because it's really important in this debate, whether it happens at a referendum level or whether it happens at a debate or a new government coming in. I like to form my opinions from fact rather than form my facts from opinions. Here's a fact. Cayman cruise tourism is down 45% from 2019. It's down 15% last year. And listen to this carefully, because there's a lot of information out there that says the rest of the Caribbean's cruise is also dropping. It is not. Cruise tourism is the fastest growing tourism sector
In the world.
globally.
Yep.
And the Caribbean is the fastest growing cruise tourism sector. Caribbean cruise tourism was
And that's based on latest data that,
Yes.
that you've looked at.
Caribbean cruise tourism is up in 2024, 12%. Cayman is down 15%. Any business or sector that has a 27% divergence with its competitors is on the cusp of catastrophic failure. Okay? So, fact, Cayman's cruise tourism is down. At the same time, the Caribbean cruise tourism is up. So when we have this conversation, we cannot be having a conversation about, oh yeah, cruise is down everywhere and they'll still come. Let me tell you, they've already stopped coming, okay? Now, as the minister said, we as a nation can make a decision, we don't want to be in cruise. And we just, let's just put a bullet to cruise's head and say, look, let's just be done with this, okay? Now, I believe that cruise tourism is an important part of Cayman's tourism economy. I also believe that cruise tourism plays a really, really important social benefit. I'm in the tourism industry. 10% of my business comes from cruise. It used to be 20%, but I know a lot of people. Years ago, I wasn't behind the project that was put forward for different reasons. But things have changed. What was the biggest change? COVID changed. Operators that went out, took all the money out of their pensions, borrowed money from family, borrowed money from banks. They leveraged themselves to survive COVID. They have not recovered.
Yep.
This idea that the cruise operators and the cruise industry can pivot to stay over is a fantasy. It's an absolute
Well, it would certainly take a lot of
fantasy.
time and planning and
They
using
can become
innovation. I don't think it's not
Just think
completely
about it, right?
doable,
You
but-
might Stingray City. Let's say you take 80% of the capacity that now go to Stingray City with cruise, and you're going to pivot that to stay over. We already complain about operators not getting enough from the cruise ships. So what do you think when you take 80% of capacity and pivot it to stay over, which we've already just talked about is flat? It's going to have the domino effect. It's not going to just impact those who are dependent on cruise. It's going to impact all of the adjacent, right? So my business is now going to be hugely affected because somebody that caters for cruise is now going to turn their eye and say, I need some of what you're eating, right? So now we'll have tour operators out in front of the hotels saying $10 trips to Stingray City. We have got to get realistic about our situation, and we've got to get realistic about our options. And this hyperbole and polar opinions has got to stop. We have to debate this like intelligent, caring people.
The thing that I think is important, because I don't want to, you're right, we shouldn't be on opposites. The truth is, we can live in harmony. One of the biggest negatives that I've noticed as I've become the minister is that we're not working together and seeing that the management of cruise has been the problem that caused the negative effects, whether it's downtown traffic or too many people at Stingray City. If we manage the cruise sector better, I think the people wouldn't even notice it. And I must admit that the former Minister for Roads had a strategic plan, who's now the leader of opposition, Joey Hugh, had a strategy about the road infrastructure around town to alleviate traffic. I can also say that there was a plan of action for the quality of movement with the design that they had. Also, with the diversification of products across the island, it won't be concentrated in any one area. The truth is, Stingray City cannot hold any more people. It just can't. So that's why within the ministry, we decided to create this grant of $50,000 for new innovative ideas so people can create programs and activities.
And what has the uptake been on that?
It's been very, very good. Matter of fact, we just awarded, forgive me, I think it's 15 new small businesses, and we're trying to make sure that they're not all on the western side of the island, so we can spread the passengers out. Because this room looks crowded right now because we're all in this room. But if all of us were spread across this property, we probably wouldn't even see each other. So when you put everybody on one side of the island in one spot, that's where the crowded negative effects that we're talking about, that we feel while we're anti-cruise. Because I see the sentiment. People, Caymanians are very welcome. We like to see tourists, but we just don't want it to affect us. So let's fix
We don't like seeing the lines and lines and lines of people in town and dealing with the traffic and that kind of thing, right? It's not being managed well.
Fair. But the management also has to do with the infrastructure. The truth is, the reason why they're not going to East End is because they can't get off the ship fast enough or get back on the ship long enough.
Let me just supplement some of what the minister is saying. I mean, first of all, when we look at that horrible line, and we had a video, would love to be able to show it, but when you look at those horrendous lines, again, that is in part because of the infrastructure, primarily the fact that we don't have piers. And people are now having to wait for tenders. What I can't understand is the hypocrisy of the argument, because one of the things that continues to be stated as the roadblock for not getting the piers is the environment. But we've taken videos of where the infrastructure is supposed to go. First of all, there's nothing, honestly, with the greatest of respect, not a lot down there to protect. But
I'm sure that there are those who would disagree with you on that.
We can all disagree, and that's the problem. I think he had a good saying just now about you getting the facts right. There's a lot of perception. I'm 55 years old, and the first time that I've actually seen that has been just recently. And I'm pretty sure it's the same situation with a lot of people in the room. So, but just to get on to talk about the negative, let's really understand. We had another panel earlier on in terms of human resources. We're talking potentially 2,587 people and more losing their jobs pretty much overnight when you lose cruise tourism. And at the present decline, it's going to last 5 or 6 more years before it's out. The Turtle Center, which I'm in charge of right now as a chairman, for example, 60% of our revenues come from cruise tourism. We have 104 employees, 97% of which are Caymanians. You can't put that amount of people without jobs, which is exactly what's going to happen when you don't have the revenues coming in, without having serious impact on the economy.
And I think that's what it comes down to. It's a decision needing to be taken and a plan being formulated as to if we do want to continue with cruise tourism, this is what we need to do. If we don't want to continue.
And what I don't want to see, what I don't want to see is this argument again, this fallacy that is cruise tourism creating all the traffic. I leave East End sometime from my farm at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm stuck in traffic.
I know about that traffic, so it's not just.
No, I'm stuck in traffic from East End at 5 in the morning. And I guarantee you there's no cruise tourists here in the country at 5 in the morning. So we really need to get past all of these things that we're telling ourselves, because we're like a group of people just throwing literal crap on the wall and seeing what sticks. And let's just really make some good factual decisions like my good friend here just said. And I think that when you look at the facts, environmental impact, employment, unemployment, and employment, and all these things, the arguments just don't stand up. This is why the opposition to cruise piers don't want to debate. They'll be blocking people, shutting people off because they don't want that, because you know what? The facts ruin a very good argument.
Is that a fair statement to make, to say that they don't want it?
They don't want it. They don't want it because we even reached out as ACT to be able to have a panelist sit-down discussion. They don't want it. They're literally blocking people on their Facebook pages, etc. So I'm speaking factually. And I'm saying that because nothing ruins a good argument like the facts. And when we look at the facts, everything supports cruise tourism. When you talk specifically about the referendum, first of all, I don't agree with single-member constituencies. I think it is divided and chopped this. Hold on, I think this is very important. Chop the country up into 19 different pieces, and why that's important?
We had this discussion some 10 years ago, Ellio, you and I. Like,
and this also goes to Woody's point about looking back in the past so that we can learn from our mistakes.
But we can't do the blame game.
But why this is important? Is because, with the greatest of respect to the politicians, they have to focus now in some very insulated areas in order to get their votes. And this is where chamber is going to become even more important, because you need somebody that's going to focus on national issues. Because any one of these politicians really don't have to concentrate on national issues anymore to get elected.
That's a good point.
This is just a reality. They could just totally ignore that and they'll get elected. And so who is going to fill that gap? Either we change it and get to a national vote, which is most unlikely, but a chamber, a body like this, really needs to help to drive an initiative where we can have a national.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Gentlemen, I'm very cognizant of the time, and we've focused a lot on cruise and other aspects.
I just want to share one
more fact. Let's go.
Okay. In 2024, cruise arrivals was at, COVID closure years aside, in 2024, cruise arrivals are at its lowest point since the year 2000. 24 years since we've had 1.1 million cruise visitors. So when we talk about traffic, I just want you to bring that into play, all right?
Yeah.
It's lowest level in
traffic.
24 years.
I want to throw one last thing. In the 1940s, I want people to understand, in the 1940s, you know how we were bringing tourists here? On a seaplane. On a seaplane in the 1940s, and they had to tender them in. And the only reason we got an airport was because a politician at the time was willing to donate the land so that we could get an airport. I want you all to understand, if you deal with some of these environmentalist groups right now, we would still be bringing people here on a seaplane. Okay. At some point, we need to move it on.
Leave the mics up, because you're going to have people in and out here. So just leave the mics up.
I apologize. I think it's important. It's my responsibility to make sure that this conversation doesn't go into us against them or environmentalists against cruise people. Because the truth is, they can both live together. We can fix this, and we can offer an amazing tourism product. We just can't be afraid, right? And you have to allow the people to have their say, because the truth is, the question on the referendum ballot is whether we want to build cruise berthing infrastructure, which is ultimately saying, do you want to be in the cruise business or not anymore? That's ultimately what the question is, because the facts is the information we have and what the cruise lines are saying, and I hope I get the chance to play that video, is if you don't build it, you're ultimately saying you don't want to be in that business. Now, we have the right to say no to that, but the truth is, Cayman doesn't have, we don't produce many other things, and our people are not prepared to transition all into financial services, or like Troy said earlier, the hotel industry ain't gonna be like, oh, come on over. It ain't gonna work. So, and not only that, they hire that industry hires most Caymanians, as opposed to stay over that hires a lot of non-Caymanians. So when I think about it as an elected member, who do I work for? I don't work for work permit holders. I work for Caymanians.
The previous panel is all about workforce development. It's about, again, planning and trying to ensure that we're filling in those gaps so that we're not so reliant on the work permits in those other areas, right? So nothing operates in isolation, so you have to be thinking of what.
Of course.
I am very mindful, though, of the time.
So we're going to get my video.
So look, I know we got to put this cruise topic to rest, but right before we do that, Deputy Premier, he was an intrepid reporter, remember? He used to work with me back at Cayman 27, and so he was at the Florida Caribbean Cruise Association conference last year and decided to do his own interviews with his phone. And so I'll hand it over to you. Ask some pertinent questions. We're going to hear a clip from that. And after we hear from that clip, we're moving on, gentlemen. Yes?
Fair enough.
Agreed? Okay.
So
I had a qualifying statement here.
So just to let you know, I agree with the governor's sentiment about number 2, communication. Communication is key for us to all be a part of a solution. And I'll admit, we have failed as an administration over the last 3.5, 3/4, almost 4 years. Because I'm a former reporter, as you heard her say. So information is key for people to understand, and sometimes it's just lack of information that's caused people to be upset. So I decided to take the ball in my own hands
On the phone, as it were.
and on my phone, and ask the questions to the top four cruise executives that comes to our shores. And you're about to see a video clip from, I think it's Carnival. And I asked the direct question, what will cruise be like in the next 10 years with other cruise peer? And you'll hear the answer. But I asked 5 questions. I'm going to be releasing a video series. This evening will be the first one, and every business day afterwards, I'll be releasing the other one. So you can hear from the executives. These are the big bosses who make the decision whether they come to the Cayman Islands or not. And you hear what they had to say, not from me, not from us. And so you can see the reality of what the future is going to be like with cruise. So this video here is a short clip of the very first one, which we'll be releasing later this evening.
So relative to Carnival Corporation and Carnival Cruise Line specifically, I would say the numbers, unfortunately, would continue to go down because now from a Carnival Cruise Line perspective, we have 3 of our largest ships that are sailing from Florida and the Gulf Coast. Those aren't reaching any destination today, which requires tendering. And we have two ships similar to the XL class and 3 new builds, which are even larger than that. So 5 of the new next class of ships will not be calling any destination that requires tendering. So unfortunately, that would mean a continuation of deployments, that won't reach destinations such as Grand Cayman when we have to tender and consider.
That's good, thank you. Deputy Premier, you walk around with a mic to...
Yeah, I keep my gear still intact,
right,
man. You never know
just
how this
noticed
business
that.
Can't get rid of the reporter in him. Tommy, I just want to say one thing really quickly.
I told you it was going to be interesting.
So that we don't, I'm going to be super quick, so that we, ACT, for example, do not come across as against the environment. We're very much for the environment. And I think what you will understand as well, and I want everyone in the room to understand, is that the piers actually is something that's pro-environment. If you look at 2014, one cruise ship alone destroyed over 16,000 square feet of coral.
Because of anchoring, you're right.
Then, when I was in high school, I think it was the Rhapsody, up on a dock, up on the reef for weeks. So much that we
Even when we were, I remember there was a...
So much so that we even made a drink off of it. And let's understand, the total square footage of the pier and the pylons that would be built in such a way that allows the sand and the ocean to flow, it wouldn't even get near the 16,000 square feet that one cruise ship did. Yeah. And a parked boat makes less noise and less pollution than tenders and cruise ships parked with thrusters on running all day. I just thought I'd add that to
I appreciate that, but there's a good segue into even more of what's an environmental concern that should be for everybody here, what's happening to our 7 Mile Beach. And we talk about the need for balance and we're talking about sustaining economic success. And our tourism product is a big part of that. And when people think of the Cayman Islands and they think of Grand Cayman more specifically, they're getting even more specific when they think of 7 Mile Beach. And what has happened, that's not no 7 Mile Beach anymore. I think one can argue it's much less than 7 miles at this stage.
You're messing up my branding here. It's still 7 Mile Beach because we're going to fix it.
We're going to fix it.
I don't think it was 7 to start with, but yeah.
So it's about balancing the...
Well, if you again, that's the facts. It wasn't 7 to start with, but yeah.
It was like 5 point something, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully there's no
So we're probably down to 3 now.
No, okay, right. But the thing about it is, anybody who was walking along, what little bit you can walk along now if you're standing on the rubble that was once Royal Palms undergoing the redevelopment there right now, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see what's happened. You go to Marriott, we might as well be in Venice. You could bring up a gondola right there, right? So it's a very concerning situation that has been going on for a number of years. We've had changes in weather patterns. There are those who believe that the development along the 7 Mile Strip itself has contributed to that, though there are also those who have shown pictures that they were well within the setback when there was a stretch of beach, right? So there again are some arguments there to be had. We can't be looking back. We can't do the blame game, as Woody said. So what is the plan for moving forward? And how do we fix this?
Okay, I'll try to be quick because I know my colleagues might want to have input on this. But just from a government perspective, the Department of Environment is in receipt of bids for a proper procurement consultant to design the plan of renourishing the area. because we can't just ad hocly do this. We can screw it up even more if we don't have the right consultants. So the bids are in about 2 or hopefully no longer than 2 weeks. We'll be able to announce who that consultant will be to design the plan. And it's to re-nourish the area.
But you've had plans presented to you in terms of what renourishment could look like, right?
Yes, and that was 2.5 years ago. So obviously we've had a larger extended area that is gone further up past Dart's house. Now it was further down. So once things change, you have to do a new design. So the design was, I think, 50% of what it should be now. So
when you say renourishment, what does that actually mean?
Putting sand back.
Putting sand back.
Yeah, at least in my mind. I don't know what the consultants are going to say, but I will not be supporting knocking down the walls that are there. I know some people have that idea, but I think that's ludicrous. The multi-millions of dollars that are placed there, it would cause so much more legal action. And the simple solution is to put the sand back there with proper engineering, marine engineering components to make sure that the sand stays there in the future. So that's where the line of thinking the government is going. We just want to make sure that the consultant designs that plan for us so we can execute it. Now, bearing in mind, the election is right around the corner.
I was just about to say, this process, this tender process, well, consultancy bid process.
So the good continuity about this is the Department of Environment is leading the charge. So regardless of which government is in, that plan will be guided by them. And those persons who know Ms. Gina very well is not going to agree to something that is not in support, that is not smart to do, as well as the next administration, regardless of who it is, will need that support from DOE as well. So I'm hoping that, particularly with all of those persons who are putting themselves forward for office that are here in the audience today, congratulations, it's a very noble thing to do, so I wish you well. But to make sure that this is not a political football, because trust me, this is damaging our tourism product. Absolutely. And I'll be honest with you, I feel hurt that we were not able to resolve the matter, and obviously the Honorable former Wayne Panton left, caused a lot of problems, the whole thing went shelved. Then we didn't really pay attention to it again until the weather started coming back and making it worse. So we dropped the ball on that, but I think we have to resolve it. Ms. Dukerin did a very good report on the value of 7 Mile Beach, and I think that it's obvious that we just have to put sand back there with a strategy of keeping it there for the long term. So but lastly, I'll do an Ellio. One thing we do know, it wasn't a cruise pier that caused 7 Mile Beach problems now.
So one of the proposals that we saw at the legislative luncheon that Chamber hosted late last year, was a sand machine. Is that one of the things that is being considered by the
I think it's a wonderful thing, but we have to take the guidance from the experts. Like, it sounds practical to me. You go get the sand that is going off close to the edge, suck it up and put it back on the beach. Sounds logical. But we don't make decisions that way. We have to wait for the specialists to give us direction. We want the fastest, cheapest, most environmentally friendly way to do it. It's just unfortunate that's going to take a lot longer than we think. I hope that persons who have extreme positions on the environment don't derail or slow the process down because they want some of the walls to be knocked down. And I think that's what's happening behind the scenes. And I think it's a silly idea, because if you think you can go to multi-billion-dollar owners of those properties after the Cayman Islands government gave them permission to build there and tell them to knock their building down, it's not going to happen. So we got to be realistic about this, put the sand back, support the private sector businesses like the hotels, and even the persons who reside there, because we have a lot of what you call generational homeowners, exactly, that have invested their money legally through a land register to be able to do that. And we gave them planning permission to do so. So the thinking that we're going to tell them to knock it down when there is an easier solution is crazy. So let's get forward and get past that and just put the sand back. And this is not something novel to the Cayman Islands. It's happening everywhere in the world, right? So let's just get on with it and get this thing done.
Yeah, I agree. I've got to second that. And I think importantly, as much as it's also managing a solution to renourish and keep in place, and the keep in place strategies for whatever is renourished is also part of the pier is not going to affect it, because we're going to have keep in place strategies. We have to have that. We also need to manage the message. because this idea that the 7 Mile Beach has eroded is a really dangerous message. It could literally take us years to overcome that message.
And millions of dollars.
You're talking about message beyond our shores.
Yes,
Absolutely.
correct.
What's going to
Not only from a DOT level, but even from a
International
social media
place.
level, for everything that we're saying. We all know that it's a small segment of 7 Mile Beach. And for every one negative image that is out there of the erosion, we probably need 200 positive images that says today it's in front of whatever property. So it's really, really important. We cannot underestimate the impact of this. And it is not just an issue for the Marriott or those properties. This is an issue for the tourism industry, and it's an issue for Cayman. And we have
there's a
to
domino
address it.
effect for sure.
Absolutely. We cannot have a them and us. They've got
No.
to pay for it. This one doesn't want to pay for it.
We got to share the
This is a
responsibility in this.
crisis. This is a crisis.
What about then, so we know that we have to address the 7 Mile Beach situation. We know that's a given. But what about diversifying our tourism product? We've had that Go East initiative that we've talked about for a long time.
How are you going to get there? You can't go
that's-
east without a road. And they're stopping that too. I mean, we believe in that. No, seriously. Like, I want to spend money within our ministry to get tourists East End, North Side, Bordentown, but they don't have enough time to get there and back.
Well,
by
there's
the time the
public
cruise ship
meetings
comes in.
next week, Tuesday and Thursday in Frankstown and Bordentown. Hope to see some of
But
you.
Tammy, again, on the diversification, that was the point I raised earlier on, and I think that that's the key. Cayman is often, and I'm not picking on this particular minister, I think it's been very, no, I'm serious. It's been successive government been very reactive, right? Because I think you need a proper plan. And trust me, I'm not one for all these super plans that just sit on the shelf, but we need a plan in terms of diversifying our economy. As I've said before, we're too focused now on the high net worth guy, and then we're too focused on being beach centric, right? And I think we need to start pushing and diversifying things in a different way. I completely support the minister with the replenishment program. I think we should put the sand back, and let's just be clear about the environment. There's a little island somewhere that nobody actually inhabits that's being eroded right now by the same coastal waters, et cetera, okay? It happens, and we just have to go ahead and deal with it. And I think Cayman has a wonderful opportunity. I mentioned this GCC program earlier on. We had 104,000 tourists, as far as my research tells me, that came under that program, but we stopped it. Why? Because there's no more COVID? We should learn from COVID. COVID's taught us what could happen. So why do we have to stop the digital nomads from coming here? Why aren't we building on that? And then now we're going to react to the beach, and then what happens? Something stopped because that one's been resolved. We need to learn from all of these things, act on it, and continue to utilize it and learn from that in the future
So
to make sure we never get back there.
We have the big Time's Up slate, but I do want to, if you will please indulge me, we need to look at the plan and the role that innovation plays. Innovation, looking at how we...
Efficiencies then.
How we are able to ensure that we sustain the economic success that has been the Cayman Islands. And I know we've been very focused on Grand Cayman, but we have 2 other islands that we should be considering as well and what's happening in Cayman Brac and Little Cayman as well. Deputy Premier.
Well, I think you're talking about trying to make sure we're efficient as possible and be ahead with the trends, particularly with AI, consumer trends. They're more eco-focused.
So that we can stay competitive
So
on
we can
the
stay
global
competitive.
stage.
But we've been doing that. Let me tell you something. CETA is a wonderful organization. To be honest with you, sometimes it makes my job a lot easier. They're already telling us the trends and telling us what's going on, and they jump ahead of the game. Cayman is very advanced in our tourism product. We don't have a problem with tourism and getting people here. What we have a problem with is our management. Here's the thing, and what I'm worried about. We have 2 beautiful properties about to come online. Where are the people going to live who's going to work in them? Are we talking about growth? You know why I had to say to myself, Kenneth, slow down a little bit, because if you do too well, you're going to create other crises. We just talk about workers coming in, and we don't have enough Caymanians to work. Where are those workers going to work? In a shack that costs them $1,900 to live in? We do have to have a plan in order for me to be an effective tourism minister. Because if I do too well, then I can create problems for everybody else. So even that we had to think about. So I agree, there needs to be a plan, and we need to decide what we're going to do about cruise. And when we decide that, okay, what's next? Because I don't want to go ahead, I could get 4 other hotels in Grand Cayman right now. But where they're going to stay, how the roads are going to be, who's going to be working in them, and what is the value for Cayman? I had to sit and read a report by an amazing Caribbean economist and question myself, hold on, Kenneth, are we going too fast? And we have to ask that question. And the truth is, we don't need anything more on this side. East End, Bontown, and North Side, and Little Cayman and Cayman Brac are beautiful, and that's where the rest of our culture is left. Let our guests go and see that area. We don't need any more traffic down here, simply.
So we have things to address, and I talked about the tourism plan, but we also need that overarching, where is Cayman going plan, right? Because that also ties in the public transport situation, the workforce development situation, all of that, right? We need to be thinking about that. Yeah. Troy,
well,
final thoughts,
I don't
please.
think that we can put together a realistic tourism development plan if it's not within the context of a national development plan.
Agreed.
Exactly.
Right? Because tourism would say, we want to grow.
Exactly.
And we're going to need 4,000 new employees. But if we don't have a development plan that says we're going to take
Where is
on
this country going?
Exactly, this immigration, for example. Because tourism is very much a service sector.
Exactly.
Okay? So that's the first thing. We need a national development plan from which we can then form a tourism development plan. The other thing is, because I think sustainability was on one of our tags here, we cannot sustain tourism growth if we do not start focusing on the people and the Caymanians within tourism. We know and we hear it, and Ms. Rosa has said it over and over and over again. People want authentic experiences, they want local culture, they want to hear a Caymanian accent. There is no way that you can continue to grow a tourism industry by 1,000 employees a year when you have no new Caymanians entering that industry. So the last thing we want to do is to kill the one sector of the industry that has the highest proportion of Caymanians, owners and employees, which is the cruise sector. We cannot do this. And that's where I think when we talk about sustainability, it's not only environmental sustainability, it's also cultural, and our people is where we need to start.
Social and economic, it's
Absolutely.
three-pronged.
Well, in response to him, I will say, preach it, brother, preach it.
Right.
So, but let me just say, I agree completely. We need to have a national plan. As I sat here in the Chamber Forum today, I'm sitting and saying businesses, and I think somebody mentioned it, can go on in their own sphere of influence and do what they have to do. But everybody should know what a national plan is so that they can sit and say, we're trying to get more digital nomads and we're trying to do this, and know that they're not just working collectively to work on their business, but also collectively for the goal for the Cayman Islands as in its entirety. And again, I just want to stress and lay out the political landscape. It's very, very important for people to understand. With no disrespect to the political figures, we have chosen a particular system that allows them to live and thrive completely in isolation. And it is going to be forums and like this is going to be bodies like the Chamber of Commerce, which is a lobby body, to just really take the bull by the horns and make sure that that happens. Because politically, let's be clear, politically, no one candidate needs to deal with any national issues to secure their seat. And that is a very, very scary situation.
If I can close by saying this, I'm going to go out on a limb here, but I think that should be one of the questions on our referendum as well. Should we go
Are you
back?
proposing a fourth?
That's my job.
National vote. Or at least go back.
Whether it's a national vote or to go back to our old system, because you're right.
I agree.
It's the one thing that we were worried about is happening where people are living on an island. The truth is, I run in Georgetown Central. I love my people. I believe my people love me. And I can just focus on Georgetown Central and forget about all the national issues. The truth is, my advisor said, Kenneth, don't take on this cruise thing.
Right.
They're going to kill you for it. I said I had to do the national job because so many other people are suffering as a result. Mainly West Bears are going to be affected by cruise the most, right? Not in Georgetown Central. We are more in general business and finance and bars and restaurants, stuff like that. But you're right. If we keep this individual approach, by all 19 members, we're going to suffer. And I think we should consider going back to the old system so we can work in a more unified way.
Or the national vote that Ellio had talked about.
And I want to applaud the minister too, because he is reaching out. You need to understand that he's reaching out to grab a national issue that's going to potentially bite him, right? When he could survive by just focusing where he's already strong in his area. And in politics, I always say there's a fundamental decision to be made. Do you want to stay elected or do you want to do the right thing? And the two seldomly converge
Very
right?
seldom.
And I'm proud to say that he's, at least as far as I'm concerned, doing the right thing.
I think with that, I want to thank our panelists here today. We didn't get to touch on the minimum wage aspect, but I think that's a whole other discussion for another
We can come
forum.
back tomorrow.
She beat me up because I'm a talk show host too, you see?
Gentlemen, thank you very much for having this discussion, and thank you to you,
Thank you,
for having us. Thank you.